In the city of Birmingham, the Department of Justice some time ago instituted an investigation into voting discrimination. It supported in the Supreme Court an attack on the city's segregation ordinances.
You've got to keep the white and the black separate.
I was truly a novice when I got elected. I knew there were injustices and I knew there were things that could be accomplished. I didn't really know how difficult some of them would be.
I have the feeling that if we can get a breakthrough in Birmingham and really break down the walls of segregation.
That to make any rational resolution of our problems, Connor had to go.
Do you think you can keep Birmingham in the present situation of segregation?
I may not be able to do it, but I'll die trying.
This program has been made possible by grants from the Alabama Humanities Foundation, the state affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities, and by the Alabama State Council on the Arts and the National Endowment for the Arts.
Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land.
Praise God.
Amen.
They threw Daniel to the lions. Did he lose faith?
No, praise God.
Neither the devil nor Bull Connor will stand in the way of salvation and equal rights for every man, color or white. So they may attack me. They might blow up my house. But they won't shut me up. And they won't keep the colored man down. Like David and Goliath, the righteous will overcome.
Reverend, the police commissioner said there won't be no rally today.
He said that you and your wife's house got blown up and that you wouldn't be here. Maybe he hoped I wouldn't be here today. I'll be here today, and God willing, I'll be here tomorrow.
Shuttlesworth!
Now do as I do. Do not fight the police. Follow me.
Reverend Shuttlesworth, now hold up! Okay, Reverend, why are you here? It's hot. And I know your head hurts. Hell, my head hurts just looking at it.
Commissioner Connor, we have the right to peaceful protest.
You don't have the right to block the streets, disrupt the peace, or congregate on city property. Now look, Reverend, what happened to your house last night was a criminal act. The good people of Birmingham had nothing to do with it.
You're right, Commissioner. The good people of Birmingham didn't have anything to do with it. Just the criminals. But you are letting the criminals run wild.
Now you and your people just go home.
Commissioner, we will not. And we haven't broken any laws by meeting at the church. And the black man has his God-given right to sit down at any restaurant or use any restroom or any public facility. Now, my congregation and I are just going to have lunch together at the park.
Boy, you leave that dog alone!
Wait, young man, back up!
There were a lot of people in this town, however, I can remember from my first arrival here, that supported Bull Connor, either privately or publicly, not just TCI.
That isn't any mystery, Betty. They supported him for three reasons. Not because they were proud of him, not because they thought he was a great commissioner or police chief or anything like that. But first, they either worked for TCI, or they sold TCI, or they sold them insurance, or they sold them supplies, or they blah, 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 or some of their relatives worked for TCI, and they weren't about to do anything that would cause someone to say, don't do business with that fellow. He's not one of ours.
Why did TCI...
That's why I say it was a plantation operation.
And Bull was the overseer, the
Sure.
one that cracked the whip,
Sure.
that made everything. Okay, tell me about cracking.
They could say to Bull, look, buddy, we've got 38,000 employees. You run for commissioner. We guarantee your election.
Well, I came to Birmingham from Selma, having gotten out of law school in 1959 and clerked for Judge Simpson. And I had married a young man from Selma whom I'd met down here in Baldwin County, whose family wanted him to come back to Selma and join the family business. Everything working satisfactorily in all quarters as far as I was concerned, until I ran into real serious, no negotiating problems with my in-laws, particularly my father-in-law. And that was over my refusal to join the White Citizens Council. It was just non-negotiable. And so I left, and I go to Birmingham. And I'm armed with a law degree, and I've just finished a clerkship at the Supreme Court. Ought to be marketable somewhere. Well, not so fast. We know you're well qualified. We know you'll do a good job. The lawyers in this firm wouldn't have any problem at all if we hired you, but our clients just would not accept it. So in that condition, I found myself a likely candidate to volunteer, and volunteered to work in Tom King's campaign, which was just cranking up.
Commissioner, I want to thank you for inviting me down here. I always thought it best when two people could sit down and talk and...
Well, hell, King, people can talk, and one can listen, then the other can listen, and not mean a hill of beans.
Some things need to be talked about. If I win this runoff with Haynes, there'll be things that we need to agree on.
Like what? Race mixing?
Like reaching some sort of accommodation on this integration thing.
Maybe we will. Maybe we won't. Maybe you'll win that runoff. Maybe you won't. Art Haynes is a hell of a candidate.
What's that, Commissioner?
I've really enjoyed your visit, but if you don't mind, I got a lot of work to do. Oh, and one more thing. I didn't invite you down here.
But the newspaper editor said that you wanted to talk to me since we didn't know each other all that well.
I guess it's best you did come down here. But we gotta be careful who we're seen with, don't we?
If I win this election, I'll be one of 3 commissioners. Just like you.
Yeah, right. Just like me. Hey, King, leave by that door. It takes you right to the sidewalk. It's quicker. Good luck in the runoff.
Mr. King, I just want to shake your hand. It's so good to see you.
I know you.
King had run ahead in the first primary, again with a crowded field. He ended up getting almost 40%, I think, of the vote. And everybody else had sort of divided up the vote. And second place was Art Haynes, and I think he was back in the 20s in terms of his percentage of the vote. So now it was going to be a contest just with King and with Haynes, Art Haynes. Tom King had gotten to this position by getting obviously moderate whites, a coalition of moderate whites, and an almost unanimous vote in the black community, which had gotten him to this 40% position.
Toward the end of the campaign, Mr. King was at the Jefferson County Courthouse, and a black citizen came up and stuck out his hand. Well, it's a political campaign, and Tom King naturally stuck his hand out and shook hands with the man. There was a photographer nearby that took a picture of it, and that photographer later brought the picture to my dad, said, "You need to run this and make a racial issue out of the campaign." My dad said, "No, I'm not going to have anything to do with that," and stuck the picture in his drawer. Not long after that, and I don't know whether it was Mr. King himself or a representative, came to my dad and said, "I understand you have a picture here." And Pop said, "Yeah, I've got that picture." He said, "Are you going to make race an issue?" My dad said, "Certainly not. I'm not going to do anything with this picture." He said, "Well, can I have the picture?" Pop said, "Sure," and gave the picture to the representative. I don't think it was Mr. King himself. Gave the picture over. Tom King had, I've forgotten whether it was $250 or $500 left in his campaign fund, and he spent it to run that picture in the Birmingham News. And I think it was the Sunday before the election. And some analysts think that was the beginning of the black bloc vote. It was the beginning of the race card being played in politics. And from the Haynes side of that story, it was very ironic that Mr. King would have spent his campaign funds to run the very picture that turned out apparently to be damaging to him politically.
The late Vincent Townsend encouraged Dad to go see Bull Connor, and the Birmingham News had supported Dad. And so he, even though others in his campaign suggested and recommended don't go see Bull, he felt that he should based upon the Birmingham News endorsement. So he did.
You have the meeting with Mr. Connor at City Hall. Say something about the nature of that meeting, just briefly, in terms of, was it a cordial meeting?
On the surface. Mr. Connor was seated at our seat top, and if you recall how he spoke, rather brusque and have a seat, Tom. And I said, "How are you this morning, Commissioner?" "I'm fine, I'm fine. What can I do for you?" That sort of approach. And I said, "Well, I just wanted to drop by and say that I fully believe, Commissioner, that when I'm elected mayor, that you and I won't have any problems. We can get along. We can work through our problems on behalf of our city. And I'm sure that's true. I'm sure that's true. So I left politely, and as I left, I walked down the steps leading toward the park. A voice behind me said, "Mr. King, Mr. King," several times. And at that point in time, I had been shaking hands with everybody I could get a hold of, you know.
Right.
And so I turned around with my hand out, and he grabbed my hand and held it to where I knew something was going on.
Dad would not specifically mention the name Vincent Townsend, who was the editor of the Birmingham News, but he was encouraged to run a full-page ad with the picture charging the proponents of the picture with the most dastardly actions in doing so, and this had no place in a modern society.
Bull Connor called this friend of mine, who, as I say, was a tenant of the city of Birmingham. In other words, he was renting, well, he rented the Hayes aircraft hangars, which the city owns. In other words, the city got them from the government for nothing after the war. And he called this friend of mine and said, "I want to talk to you." He said, "Well, okay, Bull, come on up. Jim Head's here." So I said, "I'll get out." No, he said, "Stay here. Stay here." Bull came in and says, "I want to talk to you about one of your employees." "What about him?" "We want to run him for mayor." He said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "We're talking about Art Haynes." He says, "Art Haynes is a son of a minister, Methodist minister, and he's a former veteran, and he's been on the FBI, and we want to run him for mayor." And Lou Jeffers says, "Wait a minute. He's in charge of our labor relations. I know, we know all about what he does, but we want to run him for mayor. And I have a guarantee that he'll be elected." Now, in my opinion, the guarantee was TCI said, "If that's who you want, go get him. We'll guarantee that he'll be elected." After all, they had 38,000 employees. And those employees had friends and customers and bought insurance from people and automobiles from others and groceries from others and all that. So the influence was, it's a plantation operation. Well, we kind of poo-pooed the idea for about 30 minutes, and Bull wouldn't take any poo-pooing at all. He says, "Look, let's don't waste time. We want him to run for mayor." Well, the conclusion was, okay. "Have you talked to him?" "No, but I want you to talk to him right now. You call him up and tell him that it's okay for us to talk to him about running for mayor." So he did right then. And you could tell that the fellow on the other side was dumbfounded, surprised, and didn't know anything about it. He said, "Well, here, let me Bull talk to you." So Bull said, "It's all set. We're going to run you for mayor." He did, and he was elected without any problem.
I remember when they tried to get rid of that triumvirate very well. I remember when they put up Tom King. Do you remember?
That's right. You remember what they did to Tom King?
Let's talk about that.
Well, I don't. They sort of, I hate to use the term, but they brutalized him. They set him up.
They got him
Tom
shaking the
King
hand
was a good, dependable, deeply religious, deeply concerned citizen, and would have made a great
mayor,
administrator of the city. But that wasn't what they wanted.
And at that particular time, they were having the International Rotary Convention in Tokyo, Japan. And the incoming chairman of the Chamber of Commerce, Sid Smyer, was there with his group, and they looked at that picture, and they said, you know, we can't take this anymore. And so Connor's action really stimulated the business community to start figuring, how can we get rid of this guy? And they came back and they formed a committee. It was a secret committee. They called themselves the Senior Citizens. It was made up of top CEOs from Birmingham businesses, partners from big law firms. One of our partners was a member, but not active. And bankers. And they started planning. And one thing they saw was that if they could change the form of city government, that might be a way to get rid of Connor. And they asked the Birmingham Bar Association to make a study of what kind of government would be best for Birmingham. And they were pushed on somewhat in that in the fall of '61, the federal judge, Judge Grooms, entered the order requiring the desegregation of Birmingham parks. And the commission immediately said close the parks, and it sent a message to the Birmingham Park Board to close the parks.
I do remember the demonstrations outside of our building on 20th Street, but I had a deeper insight through the involvement of my father, who was the presiding over most of the civil rights cases in northern Alabama from 1953, when he took the bench, and thereafter. Dad entered an order that all city parks, recreation facilities be desegregated, that all black and white signs be removed from bathrooms and drinking fountains, and this was met head on by the city council, who, as a response to that, immediately closed all of the parks, some 67 parks and playgrounds and golf courses, and of course there was no way that my father could order the parks to be reopened and run. He had, but that was a very sad time, and there was immediately a effort on the part of the leaders of the black community and the business and legal community to work together to try to come up with some solution to that. It was unsuccessful, and that pretty much was the first one I recall that he was involved in. It produced, like all of his other decisions, considerable backlash and high emotions.
My family, we had just moved to Center Street, and we were sitting out on the front porch in the days where you could sit on the front porch. All of us were sitting out on the front porch, and this group of white youth would drive up and down the hill and call us, come to a halt in front of the house, jump out the car, call us names, and drive on off. And they kept doing that. Well, I knew where my dad kept his Colt 45. So I went in the house and I got it, and I said next time they came down the hill, I was going to shoot them. So they came down the hill and jumped out of the car, and I rose and I fired the gun. And my dad saw me, so he deflected the shot. He hit my arm, deflecting the shot in the air, and snatched the gun from my hand and said, "Don't you know if you hit one of those, there would be nothing I could do to keep you from going to prison for the rest of your life?" Well, I sat there and cried and wondered, how could folks do this when we were just minding our own business? And that, to me, was the moment I decided I would not live in Birmingham. I would live elsewhere.
So Sid Smyer was the incoming president of the Birmingham Chamber of Commerce in 1961. But prior to that, Sid Smyer was the president of the Birmingham Realty Company. Birmingham Realty was the successor company to the Eagleton Land Company, which meant that aside from U.S. Steel, Birmingham Realty was probably the largest landowner in the Birmingham area.
I had begun work at Birmingham Realty Company where my father was the president. He being a lawyer and their general counsel until the then president retired. Father was in, or soon to be, president of the Birmingham Chamber of Commerce, and he was spending a lot of his time in efforts other than Birmingham Realty. And so I was filling that gap.
This meeting now comes to order. Regarding a meeting with concerned citizens, Mr. Head, Mr. Monahan, Mr. Stanford, Reverend Wright, Mr. Newfield, what matter do you bring before the commission?
Okay, all right. What is so important we have to meet on short notice?
Thank you for allowing us to come here and be heard. We have a statement signed by 37 businessmen and more than 1,000 members of the clergy and the civic community.
The Jewish community supports this effort also.
Well, that's reassuring, right, Art?
Commissioner Cotter, this is a statement that is plain and simple. It is titled A Plea for Courage and Common Sense. We are against closing public facilities like the parks.
When the Baptists and Jews and Catholics all sit together in church on Sunday, then we'll talk courage, right, Bull?
Hell, Head, why are you always stirring up things around here?
Myself and everyone at Birmingham Southern College has a strong desire to learn, live, and work in the city that we can be proud of. A city that holds its traditions tightly, yet progressive in its visions. A city that...
If you don't mind, Dr. Stanford, can you get to the point?
We don't think it's a good idea to close the parks, or the swimming pools, or the golf courses.
The parks are for everybody, Commissioner. The protests, the arrest, it paints a negative picture of Birmingham.
You want me to integrate the parks? You want me to just open everything to anybody? Colored, white, yellow, brown, or whatever? Everybody mixes with everybody.
I don't see the harm, Commissioner.
I tell you what, Dr. Stanford, on the day you announce that Birmingham Southern is opening enrollment to students of all colors, that's the day I integrate the parks. And I can't wait to hear what the mamas and daddies of your white students have to say about it.
Commissioners, let's be practical. My company employs thousands of people from right here in Birmingham. We even have Negroes working for us. It's important for them and their families to be able to use the parks and public spaces.
Mr. Monahan, we do appreciate your company. And you know the city of Birmingham has always been willing to work with you. Mr. Monahan, You don't actually live in Birmingham, do you?
Well, yes, Commissioner, but
You live in Mountain Brook. Beautiful, big houses there. And I hear the parks are nice there, too. You integrate your parks and leave me to deal with mine. Meeting adjourned, right, Art?
Commissioner, can't we just...
There was a city law that required that all facilities be segregated, that you had separate restrooms, drinking fountains, eating facilities, very strict city laws. These applied not just to department stores, it applied at the banks, it applied at U.S. Steel, everywhere in the community. And I might add that Birmingham was not unusual. This was true throughout the South. And we, of course, abided by the law and did have those facilities with white and colored signs on the doors in 1962.
And my father was in the middle of all of that mess, trying to get everything resolved, and that's the way I think he looked at it. He did not want to be on so much on anybody's side as to get the thing worked out. The most significant, I think, in his efforts was his work with Dr. A.G. Gaston. And Dr. Gaston did not necessarily represent the protest movement as such, but he was in touch with them.
Will Connor had just been reelected by the largest margin he'd ever had in an election to be police commissioner for another 4 years. So it was too late to stop his reelection. What are you going to do? So Smyer came back to Birmingham intent on finding a solution to that problem, and he began to inquire about what might be done, and that's when he is able to make contact with David Vann and Chuck Morgan and George Peach Taylor and Abe Berkowitz and some other of these progressive attorneys who had supported Tom King.
Dave Campbell, who had the talk show of those days, came on with his morning editorial to try to, which he did every morning to try to stir up interest for his night program. And Abe Berkowitz had been on that Bar Association committee, and he'd been making the rounds of civic clubs talking about changing the city government. And Dave said, well, you know, we either ought to get up a petition and change and have an election on it, or we ought to get behind the government we've got. It's not good for a city to be split. And I said, well, you know, he could sit up there on the mountain and pontificate easily, but getting a petition. When I got to my office, I said, you know, if I had me a petition booth across the street from every polling place 10 days from now, when this special election was going to happen, I believe I could get a petition in a single day. And we could have voting lists that are published in the newspaper. We could check people off, make sure the signatures were valid, and we could send somebody around to pick up petitions once an hour. So if Connor tried to get some of them, we'd have most of them because we'd have a security system of our own. And I called up Abe and I said, Abe, you really want to change the city government? I have figured out how to do it. And I told him briefly what my plan was. He called me back and said the executive committee of the Chamber of Commerce would like to meet with me at 2 o'clock that afternoon. I said, well, I'll be glad to meet with them, but I want to bring the president of the Birmingham Labor Council with me. Oh, businessmen and labor don't talk together very good. Look, this is a big decision, I said. If you're going to do this and win it, you've got to have both business and labor for it.
This is what we got from the Birmingham Bar Association.
So, the statute to change a form of government's been on the books for a while.
Since 1955.
You really think we can pull this off?
Look, there's no way Bull Connor and the other commissioners are ever going to allow integration of the parks, the stores, and anything else.
They don't want to change. They're just the meanest snakes.
David, what do you think?
Okay, here's where we stand. We have 3 commissioners who just got reelected. Now, this statute says we get enough signatures for a petition, we can change the form of government in Birmingham.
A vote of the people? The same people that voted in the current commission?
Exactly.
Well, actually, the petition would put the current city commission and the mayor council on the ballot and let the voters decide between the two. Then we can have a new election.
That's what I want to do, David. You write the language and get it set up, and figure out how to get enough signatures to put it on the ballot.
Never gonna happen. Not enough whites want it, not enough blacks can vote. They're all too afraid of bull.
We are gonna make this happen, Chuck, and this will be about better government, a better Birmingham, not integration.
There's a special election in August for reapportionment. If we set up tables with the petition for the referendum at all the voting sites, we might get all the signatures in one day, before Connor can do anything to stop it.
That's brilliant, David.
Nothing is going to change unless we force it. Bull is putting blacks in jail for trying to ride buses, sitting at lunch counters, and then he closes the damn parks.
That was crazy.
Everybody's ticked off about the parks, blacks and whites. And besides, it's killing business in this town.
Is that why you want this, Sid?
Well, hell yeah, that's part of it.
It might work.
Oh, it's got to work. Otherwise the feds will come down hard on us. The courts have ruled segregation is illegal and impractical.
Sid, why don't I call some of the black leaders, A.G. Gaston, Lucius Pitts, Emory Jackson, some others to help get the vote out?
Okay, good. They'll work with us.
What about Fred Shuttlesworth and Martin Luther King?
Nah, they're too busy in front of the cameras. We need to be behind the scenes.
I think you're right, Sid.
I'll get 25 business leaders to sign a pledge of support for this. David, you talk to sympathetic black leaders.
Can you get 25 business leaders to sign a pledge of support? To call a referendum, put it on the ballot, buck the commission, buck Bull Connor.
Hell yes. If I can't get 25 silk stockings, I'll get 500 anybody's. We are going to get rid of Bull Connor once and for all.
My father, Arthur Shores, was a part of those negotiations because I remember him talking about Dr. Pitts, Emory Jackson, and David Vann. They met secretly to try and work out whatever needed to be so that the form of government could change. First of all, let me say my dad hated no one. He didn't hold any animosity. Even when they bombed the house, he didn't get angry. He just prayed and said that God would take care of the men that did that. I couldn't see why he didn't get mad. I had enough anger for the two of us. But he would just tell us, Chickadee, that was my nickname. He was just says, Chickadee, this is the way things are, but it won't always be that way. There will be change, and it won't always be this way. Bull Connor represented a relative minority group in Birmingham. He did not represent the majority. Had he represented the majority, we might not have had that change in government, but we had the change.
And Art Haynes, of course, had been, since he was elected in '61, an ally of Connor's. And so the two of them had basically devised whatever strategies they devised. Well, one of the strategies they devised was to not agree with the court to desegregate parks when Judge Grooms, federal judge, ordered city parks desegregated. And so That again generated a lot of opposition among moderate whites in the cities whose children use the parks for Little League games or to just general recreation. And what do you do about Legion Field? What happens to high school football and so forth? And so that gave Van and his moderate whites more leverage to begin a campaign to change the city government. So in that election, where Wallace is going to be elected governor of Alabama, the voters of Birmingham vote to change from a commission form of government to a mayor-council form of government.
Yeah, my father was not an advocate of integration. He was not a strong segregationist either. He was just a Southern businessman who had grown up in somewhat poverty, worked his way through, and did not want to see this chaos happen in a city that he represented as being the president of the founding company, the old Eagleton Land Company, Birmingham Realty. And it was as much for business reasons, economic reasons, that he and the Citizens Committee was and similar committees like that was set up.
There were about 5 or 6 white men who were rich, who used to give Miles College a donation every year, somewhere like $15,000 to $20,000 from the group. But there was a lot of money in that day. And Dr. Bell didn't want to take a chance on losing that money because Miles needed it. Dr. Bell died, and the board appointed Dr. L.H. Pitts to be the president of Miles College. And he was all for fight against discrimination and segregation. So he told, at that time, we had organized a group to get the Miles College students involved.
The demonstrators, Dr. King, Fred Shuttlesworth, were demanding the end of segregation in Birmingham. And what happened was that nothing happened. There were talks. President Kennedy sent down Burke Marshall and several other people to try to facilitate discussions and facilitate change. But there was very little leadership in Birmingham at the time. The Birmingham newspapers were certainly not leaders. The Chamber of Commerce basically was the ostrich with its head in the sand, who took no part basically whatsoever. There were a few leaders like that we mentioned in the white community, like the young lawyers and Abe Berkowitz and Sid Smyer and Jim Head. There were people in the retail community, particularly Emil Hess, my father Isidore Bazitz, Roper Dial at Sears, and others who were part of it. But the power structure, with a few exceptions of Birmingham, did not participate. They said, it's not our problem. And the department stores were only brought into it because the blacks who were saying we have to have these changes, Dr. King, Fred Shuttlesworth, even A.G. Gaston, who was not a pusher, but he was still involved. They couldn't put any pressure on U.S. Steel. They couldn't put any pressure on the banks or the power company, which was the power structure of Birmingham. Their point of pressure was an economic boycott.
There were some black men in the black power structure who owned the insurance companies and stuff, and they knew the white men who owned all the businesses in Birmingham and stuff. So they introduced Dr. Pitts to all of these men, including Emil Hess. And At that time, it was against the law of Birmingham for black and white folk to meet under any circumstances. Dr. Pitts met Emil Hess, James A. Head, you ever hear that name? Robert Dyer, who was the president of Sears Roebuck. So we would meet with these white power structure men at the Church of the Advent. And when we first started meeting, their objective was to try to talk us out of the selective buying campaign, because the economy of Birmingham rested on the money that the Negro folks spent in Birmingham. In the beginning, they were trying to talk us out of the selective buying campaign, not having it. And Sid Smyer and all those gentlemen, everybody in that group except Emil Hess, and they fired him from the group. The men who ran the stores noticed that their trade had fallen off and they were losing money. They went to see Bull Connor, some of them. And Bull Connor told them, said, well, I'm not going to do nothing to eliminate segregation and discrimination laws. So y'all just hold on and be patient, because the niggas will be back down at the shop. So, but the niggas didn't go back to shop.
When the beginning of integration of facilities was happening, Bull Connor came and said to us, the fire department will be inspecting your store next week, and if we find violations, the store will have to be closed. Well, you know very well, if the fire department wanted to find an exit that was blocked, a window that was wrong, a door that was incorrect, they could easily have said we're in violation of some ordinance. So you had to be able to communicate with Bull Connor. Not like him, but communicate with him, because you had to survive. Now, my father and I both believe that the change of form of government was critical, because it would remove the three commissioners who were for the status quo. They were not willing to change anything. And the vote really was about not so much the form of government as it was getting rid of these three people and replacing them with other persons who would have different viewpoints. But finally, with the boycott and with the violence and the police reaction, and particularly the Children's March, because that was probably the most brilliant strategy of Dr. King, using the children for the marches. And it's horrified the country seeing these kids jailed. And finally, with these various meetings, the retailers who were being really hurt economically, because the boycott, Frank Dukes, the president of the student body at Miles College, he was very effective in leading demonstrations. Fred Shuttlesworth was not a second fiddle to Dr. King. In many ways, Fred Shuttlesworth was the heart of what happened in Birmingham. And they came to us, and finally in a meeting, the department stores, and I'm speaking of Pizzitz and Parisians and Loveman's and Sears primarily. The other stores were involved, but it was mainly focused on those four stores. That we agreed that on a given day we would integrate the drinking fountains by taking down the signs that said white and colored. And that a week or two later we would do the same thing on the restrooms, and a week or two after that we were going to integrate the restaurant, which was totally segregated. Black people could not eat there at the restaurant of any of the stores. And the last step, the fourth step that was agreed upon, we'd agree to put black salespeople on the floor.
I ran and we got elected. And when we were to be sworn in, the current city commission, Mr. Wagner, Mr. Haynes, and Mr. Connor, decided that they would not step out of their positions. And so we had two forms of government. We met up here although the council chambers have been reversed. The old city council used to sit back here where we're looking behind us. They met in the mornings and they made the decisions, in particular the decisions about running the city. And we met that afternoon, or perhaps it was late morning, and confirmed the less significant things that were going on. The police department was entirely controlled at that point by Mr. Connor. And Mayor Boutwell, who was elected as mayor at the time of our city council election, was mostly put aside.
Why can't he be you?
Bull, you want me to find the election results?
You got something there.
That's a damn gospel station. Wait,
We're
here
waiting
it is.
on the rest of the votes to come in. Legion Field, Woodlawn, some others.
Bull, I heard a bunch of them blacks vote at Legion Field.
Woodlawn. That's mine. That's my box. Those votes are mine.
Woodlawn, is that bigger than Legion Field? I mean, got more votes?
Shut up! I'm trying to hear this.
Vote is really close. Albert Boutwell is leading Bull Connor.
Boutwell's leading Bull.
I'm not deaf, you idiot.
We are now predicting Albert Boutwell will defeat Bull Connor for mayor. Bull Connor and the other two commissioners will have to leave office.
They're not getting rid of old Bull. This is crazy. I'll file suit. I'm not leaving till my term is up.
And so the matter went directly into the courts. And this issue would remain in the courts until the end of May before it was finally decided. It was not going to be until May the 26th, 1963, some 2 weeks later, that the Supreme Court of Alabama finally ruled that the new government elected, the mayor and council, would be the official government, the legitimate government of Birmingham, and they would now govern the city from that point forward. So it was now up to Boutwell and this new 9-member city council to determine what would happen from that point forward.
Something that I really think needs to be said, and it shows how dangerous a human being Bull Connor was. After Dad came in 1,500 votes behind Bull Connor, when Albert Boutwell and Bull Connor and Dad and Jabbo Wagner ran for mayor in 1963, 2 uniformed Birmingham policemen said, "Mr. King, may we speak with you?" So he went inside, shook their hands, and they said, "Mr. King, we want you to know that Bull Connor changed the votes and that you actually are in the runoff with Albert Boutwell, not Bull Connor."
So it wasn't just the movement by itself, it was the reaction to the movement, in this case by the Klan, sanctioned by Bull Connor. It's that really dramatic conflict that's played out on television screens around the country and in the White House and in Congress that leads the President of the United States to start drafting civil rights legislation. And of course in '63 was beginning to look forward to his reelection campaign in 1964 and was reluctant to have this issue define how he was going to run for reelection. But Birmingham gave him no choice.
You can never whip these bugs if you don't keep you and them separate. I found that out in Birmingham. You've got to keep the white and the black separate.